that ministry can work with the junior minister pending when she comes back. And if I were Anatu, I wouldn't even wait for the president to ask me to step aside. I would go see him and say, okay, I'm sorry I embarrassed you. Can I step aside for the period and complete my service? Or can I outrightly resign? So I'm sorry, can I just leave? I'm sorry for embarrassing. And the president can say, okay, don't worry. You just go finish your service. When you finish, come back. I'll keep your position waiting for you. I mean, it's just 4 months remaining. What Anatu is doing is she's making it seem as if she's a privileged child, even though she said her father sent her to school with Goro money. She's behaving like a spoiled brat. What's the big deal? Go and complete your service. Otherwise, every other person that completed it, you're making them look like fools. That you didn't need to complete service to become a minister. That's the message that we're sending across.
We'll begin this conversation taking a quote from Epictetus, who is a Greek Stoic philosopher. He once said, "Events do not just happen, but arrive by appointment." Absolutely spot on. Our next one is from Bola Ahmed Adekunle Tinubu, GCFR, who is a Nigerian politician, served or is currently the 16th president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He once said, "Serve Nigeria, not regions or states." That's the charge he gave to his ministers. Now let's see how this quote relates to what we'll be discussing today. Very warm greetings and welcome to D Conversation. We're reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Of course, I am Annabelle Oji. Recall that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu recently swore in his 45-member cabinet. This came days after he's assigned portfolios to them, and the 45 of them are expected to hit the ground running, like he always says. Now, here are some of the new ministers. Minister of Communication, Innovation and Digital Economy, that's Bosun Tijani. Minister of State, Environment and Ecological Management, that's Ishak Salako. Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun. Minister of Power, that's Adebayo Adelabu. Minister of State, Health and Welfare, Social Welfare, that's Tunisia Alausa. Minister of Solid Minerals Development, Dele Alake. Minister of Tourism, Lola Adejon. Minister of Transportation, that's Ade Boyega Oyetola. Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Doris Anite. Uche Naji is Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology, while Minister of State, Labor and Employment is Nkiruka Nyejocha. Minister of Women Affairs, Uju Kennedy. Minister of Works is David Umahi. Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, Festus Kiamo. Abubakar Momo is the Minister of Youth, while Betta Edo is Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation. Minister of State, Gas and Gas Resources is Ekperipe Ekpo. Minister of State is Petroleum Resources is Heineken Lokobori. Minister of Sports Development is John Eno. Minister of Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike. Minister of Arts, Culture and Creative Economy, Hanatsu Musawa, while Mohammed Badaro is the Minister of Defense. Minister of State Defense is Bello Matawale. Minister of State Education, Yusuf Sumnumu. Minister of Housing and Urban Development, Ahmed Dangiwa. Minister of State, Housing and Urban Development, Abdullahi Gwazo. Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Atiku Bagudu. Minister of State, Federal Capital Territory, Meriga Mahmoud. Minister of State, Water Resources and Sanitation, Bello Gorunyo. Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Abubakar Kia. Minister of Education is Tahil Maman. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Tugar. Minister or Coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare, Ali Pate. Minister of Police Affairs is Ibrahim Gaidan. And then you have Megeri Ahmadu, who is the Minister of Steel and State Steel Development. Minister of Steel Development is Shoaibu Odu. Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris. Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Latif Fagbemi. Minister of Labor and Employment, Simon Lalong. Minister of State, Police Affairs, Imam Suleiman Ibrahim, Minister of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs, Zephaniah G. Salo, Minister of Water Resources and Sanitation is Joseph Yusuf, Minister of State, Agriculture and Food Security, Alihu Sabi Abdullahi. So now that you know who your ministers, that's the 45 ministers are, well, maybe still counting, like some would say, probably we're still expecting some ministers to flood in anytime soon. But then now let's kickstart our conversation in that regard. And my guest on the show today is Kola Alakwe, international human rights lawyer. We will be talking about these ministers, their portfolios, and what Nigerians are to expect from all, or maybe some of them. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this conversation. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We're reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Now let's go straight to our conversation for today. And my guest is Kola Alakwe, international human rights lawyer. It's great to have you on the show again.
Thank you.
You know, most times we always do virtual, but now I'm seeing you fuska to fuska.
Well, it's good. You cannot compare the energy of the studio when you're right in there. Then.
I agree. All right, let's go straight to our conversation for today. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has chosen his ministers, and then some people will say that we might be expecting more. Even some other persons will come out to say that you all keep talking about cutting costs, but yet you keep taking more than what the previous administration did in terms of people who would work with them, whether their kitchen cabinet or their ministers and all. And then you have some other persons who have criticized his choice of ministers with regards to it's just recycle. According to them, their words is that he just recycled older people and then people that were not elected from their state to either govern them again, and then you bring them back again to become ministers. So let's start with, in that regard, what are your thoughts? I hear lawyers say that he has the constitutional right to choose his lawyers, but then some other person says, yes, we accept that he does have that constitutional right, but maybe not the crop of people that he took. What are your thoughts? Okay,
there's nothing President Tinubu can do about the size of the ministers and the junior ministers. It's a constitutional requirement. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, by the framers of the Constitution in their own wisdom, decided that every state of the Federation should have a minister. So if we're looking at, and they said this because of representation, okay? And otherwise, if you have someone like the previous president who was very nepotistic in his approach and skewed everything towards a certain part of the country, other parts of the country will not feel that they belong. Nigeria is a federation. You know, it's made up of multiple and diverse people. That is the beauty of our country, and every sector should have a share of the national cake or be part of the cutting of the national cake, if we could say that.
Is that actually the national cake?
Oh, the Federation is a national cake. Okay. Nigeria is a national cake. It should belong to everybody.
Okay, I think we just have to, because a lot of people believe that national cake is one money kept somewhere.
Well, in the context of which we are speaking, Nigeria is a national cake. It's not a state cake with a small S when we're talking about the small states. It's all states of the Federation coming together. It forms a national cake, and every part of the Federation should belong. They should have a sense of belonging. If we look at the quality of the ministers, some you could say, okay, we will expect something from them, but for someone who said his lifelong ambition is to be president of Nigeria, I expected him to hit the ground running. Compared to his predecessor, who would spend almost 6 months before he appoints his ministers, before he allows anyone to be in the cabinet with him, he would be the one taking most of the decisions for about 6 months, and just a few special advisors. So the National Assembly, in their wisdom, made a law compelling whoever the incumbent is to choose ministers within 60 days. And the current president waited till almost the 60th day before he sent the names. I would think that if you've always wanted this position, you would have some semblance of a list that immediately after his address at at Eagle Square, second day or third day, you should hit the ground running and announce the names of people who are going to work with you. You could have even started with maybe like key ministries. You can start with 10. First and foremost, rule of law, like the Attorney General. Second, maybe health, education, Minister of Defense, key areas which touch on us. So if the State Security Service said they were screening, they were doing security clearance and everything, and you took that long, and you're now, eventually fumbled by inserting someone who didn't complete NYSC, who is now a 7 minister. Why did you take all that time? What were you clearing? What were you screening? If you're still going to not screen properly, as far as the NYSC.
Because now this shot is actually to the SSS or to the president.
To whoever it's directed to whoever it hits, who did not do their job properly. The NYSC Act is very clear. You cannot, serve in the government or take up a government position until you have finished your service. And it comes with very sincere consequences. If you did not present yourself for service when you ought to have presented yourself, or you absconded, they're not things to be, they're not things to be trivialized. And that is why the presidency, the organ, has been silent. And even some sort of message was going around in social media, purportedly by the said minister, saying that she has not broken any laws of Nigeria. She issued a rebuttal and said that statement was not from her. She's not, because clearly the law was broken, and the Attorney General ought to be, advising the government, because he is the government's lawyer. He's a lawyer to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and if there's a breach, we hounded Kemi Adeosun out of yes, that was what happened. We hounded her out of office because, she presented a result that she should not even have presented in the first place.
So why exactly do you think that it's different in this case? Because if same thing was done with Kemi Adeosun at some point, why is there so much silence? It was like graveyard.
Well, there's no silence because on the streets of Twitter,
I mean, from the presidency.
It's obvious that they fumbled, especially because the person in question did not pass a National Assembly screening a few years ago for a job she was nominated for. And I think that was the reason why she eventually decided to go and finish the service. Because the thing is that at the point when you are going to do your passing out parade, or a few months before passing out parade, NYSC has already issued all the certificates that are going to go out. But you've got to comply and finish it. That's why you do a clearance. So at the time when you're doing your clearance, if there are fulfillments which you have not satisfied, you will not be issued this discharge certificate. Depending on how the severity of the case could be, they could say, okay, they're extending your service by 3 months, they could say by 6 months, but those certificates are there. When you finish that penalty period of the extension, then it's presented to you. So it will be as if you graduated with you passed out of the scheme with your colleagues. If you don't turn up at all, the rightful, if you don't satisfy those requirements, like in the issue of the minister who said, for family reasons she couldn't complete it and then she was remobilized again. Ordinarily, what they should have done is to destroy all those certificates that people didn't pick up during that year or during the period of the penalty. It is impossible for you to issue a 2002 or 2003 or 2001 certificate to the person who has absconded in 2001. You can't issue that anymore. It ought to be destroyed, or at best they keep it for evidence, and which we are now saying that, we have a copy of the certificate, she did not complete it, we have it as in our file. But the correct position will be to destroy it because they're unclaimed certificate. Well, maybe it's also good that it didn't destroy it. At least we have something we're talking about as evidence now. I remember at the Oputa panel where Leonard Silk, Femi Falana eventually got his discharge certificate almost 20 years after he had finished service, because he was blacklisted and everything, and he couldn't collect his certificate. NYSC was compelled right at the Oputa panel to pass to Senate. So maybe the destruction completely might not be the ultimate way out, because if they had destroyed it now, well, in this case we would not have known. But this is a personal opinion, I might be wrong, so that the government is not seen to be condoning illegality, this person ought not to have passed the security clearance. Otherwise, you're sending a wrong signal to people out there that all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. I'll leave it there.
Okay, so I hear some people come out to say, especially I had one of the, I think, it's the president of Arewa, who came out to say that they ask some people take a bow and leave, and then they ask some other persons, just like El Rufai, and you also have Stella Okotite, you have Dan Ladi, who were asked to up until now they're still checking. So if they took all the time, the DSS and all took all the time to check other persons and they asked them to go, how come these other persons, why are they still held back?
There has to be some semblance of equality. You've got to treat everybody equally. You cannot treat some people differently than others. I understand that if you've worked in the National Assembly, either the Senate or the lower house, the House of Representatives, the custom, the procedure is, we know you very well, you can leave. Or some eminent people like governors like Chief Bola Ige, when he was appointed into government by the Obasanjo administration, nobody was going to grill the Cicero of Esauke. His antecedents spoke for him. The problem now is how do you apply this if you don't have one set of rule that works for everybody? How do you exercise this discretion? It means that you're not able to call people out, which is a balance these days for some of the things they've done. One of the reasons why El Rufai did not scale through was his utterances whilst he was in government, and there was a series of petitions against him. For instance, one of the elections where he said international observers are going to go away in body bags. How are you, for the life of me, going to be able to defend such a thing in the National Assembly? Or expect to be appointed as a minister in the National Assembly without having to answer those serious questions? Or the way in which you've handled security issues in Kaduna State. Why is Southern Kaduna always boiling on fire?
But if that's the issue, you should also ask the former governor of Zamfara State, why was Zamfara State always in the boiling kettle?
And that is why I said there should be a uniform application to these things.
Even though when the president came in during his inauguration, he said he's going to apply rule of law. He's going to govern by rule of law.
I haven't
Do you
seen
see
that.
this happen?
I haven't seen that. And I am disappointed, constrained, because as I said in one of your programs earlier, the president used to be on the other side of the divide. He fought the Abacha government with Nadeko. We were in university. We were champions of democracy, and they would come, fire us up, rile us up. We were the foot soldiers, always demonstrating in schools and everything. We bore the brunt of the June 12 crisis, the ASUS crisis and everything, having to spend 7-8 years in university to study law, or medicine, when you could have finished in record time. Every time you have to school abroad, you're having to explain why there's a long gap. I thought law was 3 years or 4 years. That's what they say. How did you end up studying law for this long? But the period which we spent in university, some people who were able to leave Nigeria then and go and do their degree in, say, Buckingham University, which is a rapid process, 2 years. Some of them came back with their PhD about the same time when we were all going to law school together. So that shows you the damage that was done in the period of the fighting the military and making sure that democracy was entrenched. Now you've come back. You governed Lagos State. You took your rest and you've come back as president and building up all this wealth of experience. I don't think you should be the one breaching the rule of law, for instance, with the CBN governor and the way he's being treated with Bauer of the EFCC. You can't just keep someone perpetuating in the dungeon somewhere, even if it's a house arrest, without allowing the rule of law to rule. And he should know better. He should know, because he used to criticize, and expect that the rule of law will be. What he's doing is not different from what we've done to Jivemke Abiola. We put him in detention and the poor man passed away. If anything happens to Emefiele or Bauer now, or how do we explain that?
So I hear some people come out to say that you've actually made quite a number of points that we will drag out from. Now, here some people say that the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu decided to put some of his boys in the key areas. Do you agree to that? Because he just say when you check the names, you just say, okay, this guy has been with him in Lagos or somewhere else. So that's more like compensating them.
Well, I'm not sure if compensation is the right word. Probably just chose people who he knows very well and he can work with. There's nothing strange in that. Governments all over the world does it. The UK, for instance, you will always find people who are stuck together, went to the same school, they will have gone to Oxbridge and known each other, they will have been part of the debating societies or whatever. So they all come together and, you know, eventually your friend in government will remember, say, hey, come and work for me because I know what you can do. It's the same way all over the world. Presidents or governors tend to pick their loyalists. You don't want a treacherous person inside your kitchen cabinet or inside your government. So I don't blame him. I would do same when I'm picking. I would pick people who I know very well and who wouldn't betray my trust.
Most definitely. All right, let's go back to the ministers of Earth. That's Hannatu Musawa and her case. So what would you advise, if you have to make any advice to them in this case? How would you sort this out? Because NYSC keep coming out with their own, saying that no, she's still serving, but the presidency just keeps mum about it.
I think I would have called her, since if I was president and I was one that appointed her, I would have told her to step aside briefly. It's just 4 more months. Go and finish your NYSC. That ministry can work with the junior minister pending when she comes back. And if I were Anatu, I wouldn't even wait for the president to ask her to step aside. I would go see him and say, okay, I'm sorry I embarrassed you. Can I step aside for the period and complete my service? You know, or can I outrightly resign? You know, so I'm sorry. Can I just leave? I'm sorry for embarrassing. And the president can say, okay, don't worry. You just go finish your service. When you finish, come back. I'll keep your position waiting for you. I mean, it's just 4 months remaining. Yeah. What Anatu is doing is she's making it seem as if she's a privileged child, even though she said her father sent her to school with Goro money. You know, she's behaving like a spoiled brat. You know, what's the big deal? Go and complete your service. Otherwise, every other person that completed it, you're making them look like fools. That you didn't need to complete service to become a minister. That's the message that we're sending across as a country.
Like some musicians will say you don't have to go to school. It's not all about school.
Well, whoever says that education is expensive should try illiteracy, should try ignorance. And that's where you see the difference. And when musicians and all these people say that, look at their lifespan. What's the durability of how many of them had or were able to have that staying power to last? I think only King Sunny Ade has been able, who is still on his feet at 70 something, and he wouldn't say you don't have to go to school, because he made sure that lots of his kids went to school, and he improved himself over the years. Otherwise, he wouldn't even have that staying power.
All right then. So I hear you say that she would have just decided to go to the president, but then I just remember in this part of the world, not just country, Africa generally, do we ever like to resign? You have presidents who want the seat forever.
She has a British education. Our case is different.
So that's the reason why she
knows what obtains in international best practice. And I don't want to personalize this. I've got nothing to against her. I've never met her before. Probably she's my LinkedIn friend or something, or share a connection on LinkedIn. But she has a British education. She knows the standard. She knows what to do.
All right, let's go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue this conversation with Kola Alakuni, international human rights lawyer. I will see you after this time. I'll join us again. Even though we had President Bola Ahmed Tinubu during the FEC meeting say that he inherited an already bad economy, and someone say, from who now?
Well, it's part of the government. When it says he inherited a very bad economy, it's party. It's a continuum. It's part of the government, and he begged for the job. He applied for it. Okay.
So it means that you already know.
And he says it's his turn. He says, he's man enough. He's an Asiwaju. You know what Asiwaju means? Asiwaju means a forwarder, a champion, the one who goes in front, who leads the war. So he should live up to his title. It's a Jagaban. It's Jagaban Bogun. And it's a commander's title. He's the one who applied for it. He said he wanted to be commander-in-chief. He can do it better. And even when people exercised questions about the frailty of his health, he said, I'm not a grave digger. I'm going to use my brain. It's brain work. It's not physical work. It's not a laborer's work. So he knows what was on ground. Maybe the argument could be said that when you're outside government, you don't know as much as when you get inside.
Welcome back. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation, and we're reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. If you just joined us, you've actually missed out on the first part of the conversation, but now we'll go straight to our second part, and my guest on the show today is Kola Alakwe, international human rights lawyer. All right, before we went on that break, we've actually exhausted and talked so much, in fact, so that, just like you said, so that it doesn't look like we have one personal beef with a particular person. But now let's move and talk about other ministers and ministries. We have the Ministry of State Defense. We talked about him earlier. That's the former governor of Zamfara State. And then some people come out to say that why would you have someone who, when he was a governor, you have bandit hoist Nigeria's flag, and the most part of the state was brought down by bandits, but now you come back to make him a minister, even though his principal, or who the Minister of Defense himself, has actually done good, according to most people, has actually done good in Jigawa State when he was the governor of Jigawa State. So what are your reactions to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's choice of the defense ministry, especially at such a time when we're fighting insecurity, banditry in Nigeria?
Okay, I've heard some people say that the Minister of Defense ought to be a military man and all that. That is outright falsehood. This is a civilian government. The president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces is a civilian. All the defense chiefs, the army chiefs, they must be loyal to him.
The NSA, some people say he's not supposed to be a formal police intelligence, but a military person.
That's not true. This is a civilian government. The president is a civilian. He gives an order to them and they must obey. He's the commander-in-chief. That is the starting point. So all the ministerial positions, if the president so wishes to fill them with civilians, so be it. The military must learn to take orders from the civilians. We are their employers. That is the correct position all over the world. Is the Minister of Defense in the UK a military man? Of course not. And we've had Sandy Berger, National Security Advisor in America, Condoleezza Rice, where all these people military. Condoleezza Rice is a professor of Russia. So what are we talking about? The defense ministry in America collapsed. Alhaji Ribadu in the First Republic that's why you have the defense house in Lagos known as Ribadi House, was a civilian. Well, these are the damage that the long years of military rule did on the psyche of Nigeria. We tend to think it's just the same misnomer by thinking that the FCT minister should be a northerner. Who said so? If we are saying that this is the Federal Capital Territory and the Federal Capital Territory belongs to all of Nigeria, why should the minister of the FCT be from one part of the country only? It's injustice. They just did that and perpetuated it over the years. And it was Professor Mrs. Ikejani Clark. Is she a northerner? She was Minister of State in the FCT. Jumoke Akinjide, is she a northerner? She was Minister of State for FCT. So it's people spew all kinds of rubbish to suit their narrative.
Sorry, I had to butt in there. I'll let you continue. But then, if you say that he's not supposed to be a particular region, how about the governor of a particular state, Lagos? Would you say that he's not supposed to? He can be anyone, as long as Lagos is. Most people will say Lagos is not for Yoruba. Most people will say Lagos is for the Yorubas.
Well, if we number one, the dynamics at the federal level is very different from the dynamics of politics at the local level. Most politics is local, but you have to give kudos to Lagos State. Lagos State, a lot of people who actually serve in the government in Lagos State, historically, if you trace their background, are not from Lagos State. Sanwo-Olu has the Jebu roots. Ambode is an Ilaje man. His parents migrated to Lagos. His first JAMB application, when he was asked where he came from, he put Ilaje there, Ondo State. Ilaje is just across the water from Lagos State. A lot of them come to Lagos State through the boats, through the ferry. They don't even come by land. Even the incumbent president's origins, as far as the Lagosian has been doubted.
So I'm not saying just Yorubas. I'm saying
yes, of course.
An Igbo person,
Ben Akabueze was commissioner in Lagos State for 16 years.
We are talking of governorship.
Well, if we get to that level of maturity, why not? Lagos State was generous in appointing Ben Akabueze as commissioner for budget and planning for 16 years. 16, unprecedented. He served with 2 governors. He served with Governor Bola Tinubu. He served with Fashola, and then when they were coming to federal level again, they brought him along. The vice president brought him along because they had worked together in Lagos when the vice president was attorney general, and he came to head the budget office. That's the way it should be. It should be about merit and everything. But when you start stoking ethnicity, and you mentioned a particular tribe, for instance, and this particular tribe goes to Lagos, and you are referring to as no man's land, it tends to aggravate people. If you're intending, the intention of your statement is to say, oh, this land is free for everyone, everybody can come here, but in the parlance which it is interpreted, especially by the half-educated people, you snub the local people and rub it in their faces, you're not going to get very far. You're going to get that kind of backlash. I think I might be wrong, but you're going to get that kind of backlash from the indigenous people. We need to evolve to a level where people from various parts can feel safe. Let me tell you something. As forward-looking as the United States of America is, you cannot be a United States president without being born on the soil of the United States. You not just an American, you must be born on U.S. soil. They put that restrictive clause there because it's a land of migrants. A lot of people migrate there. Donald Trump, as a grandparent or his great-grandparents were migrants as well. They came from Europe. So it's a melting pot. But they make sure that whoever is going to rule them as president must be born on U.S. soil. You remember the controversy when Barack Obama was going to be president? They were saying, he doesn't have, they want to see his birth certificate or not. Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor of California for 2 terms, and California did very well. California's GDP is more than the GDP of lots of countries around the world. They have the 3rd highest GDP in America also. The economy of California is bigger than the economy of Nigeria, and that is just one state. And Arnold did very well, but he could not contest the United States president because he was not born on the soil of the United States. He migrated there and naturalized. So those are the issues. To let you know, even as in a country as advanced as the United States, they also put some limiting features there to make sure it's not free for all. So when we get to the level where there's no mutual suspicion anymore, Nigeria has been badly fragmented in the last 20 to 30 years. It's horrible. You only need to belong to WhatsApp group where you have various flavors, classmates WhatsApp group from various parts of the country, even estate groups, WhatsApp groups, and to see the bitterness and the mutual suspicion. Brothers no longer behave like brothers. Sisters are suspicious of each other. Friends are suspicious of each other because of the way in which we've handled religion in our country. Tribe and all sorts. So we're a deeply fractured nation, and this president must rally around quickly to ensure that the fragmentation does not go long. Otherwise, people are going to become disillusioned, and Nigerians are very impatient people. I would have thought that Nnamdi Kanu, for instance, will have been released. I can bet you with you that if you release him because of this state of health and everything, he will probably just go to the UK to go and sort out himself medically. And if he's going to the UK, I think with what his eyes have seen, the British government are going to say, hey, you're a dual national. We will prefer if you I don't think if Nnamdi Kanu is released, is going to continue on the trajectory which he continued before. I think he will have learned his lesson. I also know that the gentleman who sits down in Finland issuing directives would not be able to do so if Nnamdi Kanu is released. So it will be a win-win for the Nigerian government. It will assuage the feelings of the people from the parts of the country where Kanu is from, and it would show that the president is a Democrat and is willing to engage and talk. You can't just continue on the trajectory which his predecessor was doing, that created a lot of tension.
But then you have some people that will tell you that they are born activists. We were talking before we started about Omoyele Sowore. I recall having that conversation with him, and then I hear him say that President Bola, he was quoted as saying that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is, with the way he's going, it will be very easy to create revolution in Nigeria. And I asked him, some of these statements were the same statements that you made that put you in this, and then he said he's not going to stop. Well, so some people are just like that.
If you know my closeness with Sowore, I was on his legal team, and so I need to let you know this disclaimer, because whatever I say will probably be termed as being biased. Maybe I am biased, but I think the way which Yele Sowore uses the word revolution, it's not in the way of forceful or treasonable movement against the government of Nigeria. I think he's talking about a revolution of the mindset, and that's why he keeps saying we can't keep doing things this way, we can't go on like this. We need to press the reset button, we need to think again and all. And I think President Tinubu has a very good resource person in Yele Sowore. He could have, and they were all part of the pro-democracy movement. I think that's a wonderful asset to the president if he is tapped.
But then he said he was not interested in it still.
Well, never say never. I don't know if I said he wasn't interested. And we saw what happened. Governor Wike said he wasn't interested severally on TV. He
was not coming to Abuja.
And we saw what happened. So I think if someone like President Tinubu with his pro-democracy antecedents and Sowore were able to see it, and I'm sure the president can tap him up and make use of it. I haven't discussed with Sowore anyway, so I hope I'm not embarrassing him. Because a lawyer who sent you work, did I tell you to go and did I tell you to go and advocate for a government position for me? But I just feel that then these are sort of people that we can test their resourcefulness and say, okay, let's see what you can do. I mean, Yele was leading in the Lagos State, University of Lagos Students Union, way back, over 30 years ago, about the time of June 12 and everything. So, they know how to galvanize the youths, they know how to, run the system. Even without the resources of the mega parties, it still makes sure that his voice is heard when it comes to the campaigns which he has been doing. So I think the president has a good resource person there if he can tap into it. And there are hundreds of them around Nigeria with fresh ideas, well educated, which the government can infuse into governance. So I think we should be putting our best foot forward if we want to be competing internationally, with our peers. We can't be seen as a gerontocracy where everybody who is serving at the highest level, you've got to be very old, and we need to project a vibrant and stronger presidency or government to the world. We should take a cue from what we see in France, in Canada, in the United Kingdom, in Australia, and see how vibrant these countries are, and the president in New Zealand, in various places. Yeah.
All right, taking a cue from where you landed, you talked about the youth. Now we have the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, that's Wale Edun. Also have the Minister of Tourism, that's Lola Ade. And then we also have the Minister of State, Labor and Employment, Kiruka Onyediocha. So in that regard, because you talked about the youth, so what exactly, if KPMG came out a few weeks ago and said that Nigeria is hitting or has hit 40% from when we were always in 36 or 35 or 33% of unemployment rate, and then you have a lot of people, restive youth, who are unemployed at the moment. Now you have these ministries. What exactly can they be doing, or should they be doing, with regards to bringing up this youth and then making them gainfully employed? Even though the president promised I think it was 100 million job in digital economy, and then you also recall that the former administration talked about lifting 100 million people out of poverty, even though 133 million people, according to the NBS, were plunged into multi-dimensional poverty. And I saw a video yesterday where, I think it was in Bayelsa State, where they said they went to raid a particular warehouse where they stocked palliatives. Even though I always hammer it, I dislike that word palliative, because when you remember what that happened during COVID-19, and then how these same things happen, then you have youth who went there to bring out all the palliatives that were dumped in there since 2022, and we're in 2023. So in this regard, what should they be doing? Even though we had President Bola Ahmed Tinubu during the FEC meeting say that he inherited an already bad economy, and someone say, from who now?
Well, it's part of the government. When it says he inherited a very bad economy, it's party. It's a continuum. It's part of the government, and he begged for the job. He applied for it. Okay.
So it means that you already know.
And he says it's his turn. He says he's man enough. He's an Asiwaju. You know what Asiwaju means? Asiwaju means a forwarder, a champion, the one who goes in front, who leads the war. So he should live up to his title. He's a Jagaba. He's Jagaban Bogun. And it's a commander's title. He's the one who applied for it. He said he wanted to be commander-in-chief. He can do it better. And even when people exercised questions about the frailty of his health, he said, I'm not a grave digger. I'm going to use my brain. It's brain work. It's not physical work. It's not a laborer's work. So he knows what was on ground. Maybe the argument could be said that when you're outside government, you don't know as much when you get inside. But there are areas of our economy that we can quickly try to revamp. Nigeria, we make the mistake when they keep saying, manufacturing jobs, we want to go from producing, leave consumption. Nigeria is production. Not, generally, from time immemorial, historically, we are not a producing economy. We produce very minimal. The biggest industry which we had producing in Nigeria was the oil. When we were at the peak, pumping out 2 million barrels of oil a day. Where naturally, historically, we are less of a producing nation. Nigeria is a trading nation. We're a nation of traders. It was trade that brought the British here. Trade in palm oil. We've been trading in pepper and spices with the Portuguese since the 1400s. We're a bunch of traders. Nana Olomu, all the historical figures then, we're traders. We are not a producing nation. We need to evolve into a producing nation to create those jobs, and we have not been able to fully evolve into a producing nation. That's the catch.
So when you have a president or a candidate come to tell you that we can move from consumption to production, even though it's been there all the time, is that possible?
That's the ideal. That's the ideal. We banned the importation of rice, for instance. We said we wanted to start producing rice locally. Emefiele created all these instant millionaires and rice pyramids. The way it's now turned out to be artificial because rice became more expensive. The rice that we were trying to produce within Nigeria became more expensive than the rice that was coming from Thailand. So what's the sense there? If we say we want to grow the economy and grow our agriculture, and the ordinary man who went to buy rice at 8,000 naira goes back to the market and wants to buy the sack of rice and they say it's 40,000, and he keeps wondering what kind of voodoo economics are we doing. So we can't be hurting the economy more by saying we want to produce. That is what I'm trying to say. We can't sustain it. We can't be. A lot of people would rather go back to the PDP years when the sack of rice was 8,000 naira instead of 40,000 that it is now. And it was foreign rice because we have acquired a foreign taste in our food. Do you understand what I'm saying? But there are other areas which we can diversify into. India, for instance, has over 1 billion people. Large percentage of them are poor. But in the last 10, 20 years, India has become a hub for tech, fintech. Lots of people are diversifying. And what they're earning is in US dollars. So you could be in India and be working for a company, an international company, either in the US and all that, as a remote worker, and you're earning well above, the ordinary salary of people there. So we need to grow more into IT is the future. There are lots of people, lots of COVID taught us that we can be working remotely and our work will not suffer that much. So we need to diversify. Youths need to go into all this, IT programs and etc.
And it looks like AI is about taking people's jobs,
which means that there's going to be less physical jobs. So we need a switch. We need to change. Who heard of Zoom until COVID? Zoom has given Skype a run for his money. That Skype is almost extinct, and we've had so many other communication tools as well. There's Meets, there's these, all sorts, because we need to evolve with the times. So if the government wants to create jobs, digital economy jobs is one of them that we can, empower, allow them to flourish. Fintech, for instance, they gave the major banks a run for their money. And so you need to open all this. Who knew the capacity? Right now, I think even more than oil, telecoms has earned for Nigeria in the last couple of years, even than oil, because oil production has, slowed down with all the incidents in the Niger Delta and everything. But with MTN, MTN first came and sold us the dummy that per second billing was not possible. It can only be per minute. So even if you're trying to make a call and the call drops, you still get charged as if it was a minute. It took a Nigerian man to come in and break that yoke. Chief Mike Adenuga with Globacom, a truly Nigerian company for Nigerians. So we need to get who knew that telecoms could be yielding that amount of trillions that they've made. If we don't, and it created a lot of work for people. The people who were jobless became recharge card sellers. They were, sitting in umbrellas, and you can see what is happening with the fintech too now with this POS thing. So that's where I think a lot of jobs that can reach into the deep, hinterland for people. We can easily do something and turn around. And touch a lot of the youths. Giving
states palliative, either 2 billion initial or 5 billion, is that even is that a good idea at all with what we've seen happening?
We've seen that every time government gives food, it doesn't get to the right people, and that was what happened where warehouses were being looted by hungry people. So how can you give your elected lawmaker, they give them Indomie and food items, and some people said, they were keeping it, they will distribute it on their birthday. They personalized and weaponized food to the electorate. So we don't have a fair system. We're a peculiar breed, and we need to be able to deal with our issues in a peculiar way. Palliatives are given all around the world. In some countries call it government relief. They do it in the UK. They do it in the US, where you stretch to the poorest of the poor. If there are natural disasters, for instance, then that's why you see, a tornado happening here. These relief items are quickly put together. There are agencies who deal with that. Private sector as well comes to support. But in our country, the reverse is the case. We have, I don't know, will I say is the poverty level that is so bad, or people are just gluttonous? And the officials who are given the responsibility of these things end up taking it to the markets to sell. Some of the COVID COVID
School bags.
Yeah.
You still see.
Indomie, the police,
Not to be
Nigerian
sold.
police treated, they traced some of it to the market in Kano. A couple of years ago, I think it was 2017 or so, I can't remember, the Saudi government sent dates. You know, the Middle Easterns, they like dates a lot. It's a nourishment thing, especially during the Ramadan fasting. They break with it. They sent it to our government, and the Saudi government was pissed when they found out that these things were being sold in the market. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs had to issue an apology to them. So you see, we're our worst enemies. When there's nothing wrong in government trying to, that is the job of government, is to provide succor to the people. Otherwise, people will become hopeless.
So now someone's actually said maybe it's because we don't have all of these natural disasters, wildfires, erosion. That's the reason why we're taking advantage.
No, we have our own natural disasters. There's going to be flood again this year.
It's not as what you have, the hurricane, Katrina hurricane.
Yeah, we might not have hurricanes, but we have our own natural disasters as well. Flooding is a huge problem, especially if you live in the areas where this flooding takes place, especially Benue, Kogi. It becomes a huge issue. And NEMA will always have a job to do when it comes to distribution of materials and relief funds and all. So we need to get our acts right.
Especially, so that getting our acts right, it starts with the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, I guess.
They are the ministry that is now, in charge of NEMA, and they're the ones who they are the focal point for disaster relief in Nigeria. So we need to make sure that whoever we put in that agency is someone that knows their onions.
Let's talk about the Ministry of the Attorney General of the Federation and the Ministry of Justice. I had a conversation with a Federal Commissioner of RAMFAC, that's Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, when he talked about severance payment and how they intending to increase severance payment of former presidents and judges and political officials. And then we had that argument with regards to why do you have to increase, especially for politicians. And then they said, because I don't want to talk about the argument that we had that day, but then his excuse was when some of these people go back home, most people are expecting them to just release money, but they don't know that they're not even earning enough, so they have to give them enough for them to survive. Now let's talk about the judges. You talk about I heard this morning a particular interview where someone talked about judges, the amounts that they earn as salaries, and some of them say that they cannot even afford to take their children to good schools. So that's the reason why you see some of the lapses that they have, and you might not be able to curb that that friction or that relationship between the judges and the executive, or the judiciary and the executive. So at this point, how exactly would you advise the AGF, the Ministry of Justice, to look in that direction? Because definitely he's someone from the bench.
Okay, it's not as easy as it looks, because it's all interwoven. I know our judges we can pay them better. They're not well remunerated. We don't take their welfare very seriously. They're overworked. They spend long hours. A lot of them write in longhand. It's only when you are in some of the prestigious courts, like the Supreme Court and Court of Appeal, maybe some federal high courts, where all these recording gadgets still work. I know when Professor Shibajo was Attorney General of Lagos State, Lagos tried to revolutionize all this to make sure that we had transcripts writers, we had audio recordings to relieve the judges from writing longhand. You hold a pen and you write for 20-something years, and they work long hours. So yes, I do support that the judiciary is well funded. It's the third arm of the government, and out of the three arms of the government, that's the only place where you have career public servants. The executive are not career public servants. They're subject to elections. So is the legislature, National Assembly. So what you found out is that the two other arms of government have emasculated the judiciary to the point that the independence of the judiciary is threatened. Having said that, when you look at the lifestyle of our politicians, someone is saying on TV that we've sent something into your
emails to your prayers to your emails.
Yeah, and we all got to hear. We've been talking that look, you see, the legislators are very clever. What they've done is to make sure that what is on paper, that's their salaries, they'll say is the revenue and fiscal whatever that determines it. So they've been very clever not to put the actual amount which they take home every month or year on paper, and that is why there's a lot of outcry when people heard what the Senate president blurted out on TV, and they had to say, "Oh, I withdraw that statement," because it's not on paper. It's not known to you and me. It's all these things are padded behind. We are not serious. When we're serious as a people, we would reduce our cost of governance. Or when the people get so furious and they demand that all this are slashed out. Everybody is saying, "Oh, times are hard, bear with us," this, but the politicians don't want to take a hit. You and I and the ordinary people on the streets, we are the ones taking the hit. Once you get into politics, fueling of your car, your house, running expense, everything is put on the government tab. They are the ones who send their kids largely to school abroad. They go for medical treatment abroad. The ordinary people, on the streets, in the markets, and even the lecturers can no longer do that. If you were not privileged to have, giving back to your kids abroad anymore. So everybody is telling the ordinary Nigerian to bear with us. Times are hard. But they see the flashy lives of the people in government, the motorcades. How can somebody be going around with a fleet of 17 cars? And you're going to feel, look at the running costs of those vehicles. And you want the ordinary man who is struggling with even finding taxi fare. They are now adherents of urgent 2K. Please send me 2K. And you want them to be the ones sacrificing. People in governance have refused to sacrifice. That's the problem.
All right. Our time is fast spent, but if you can help us in 2 minutes, quite a number of things we need to discuss, but then our time is fast spent. Let's talk about the new Oga landlord of Abuja. Came out to make some statements of building collapse and how they're going to bring down buildings, especially those ones in green areas. And then he also talked about open grazing, how it's going to stop completely, especially in the city areas. And then you have some other persons that come out to respond, say it might create a reprisal attack with what we see in Benue State. What are your thoughts in all of this?
Well, a reprisal attack of what we see in Benue State, that's shameful, because the attacks should not even be happening in Benue State in the first place if we had a responsible government. The state governor are not in charge of security. That's the problem. And I didn't discuss this fully when you were talking about Matawale's performance in Zamfara State. Yeah, he's called a chief security officer. It's a decorative title. He doesn't actually command any troops. The police don't answer to the governor. They answer to the IG. The state commissioners answer to the IG. The IG answers to the president. Soldiers don't answer to the governor. They answer to the GOCs, and GOCs answer to the army chief, and the army chief answers to the chief of defense staff and the president. So all these things, these killings that went on in Benue and wherever, it was the responsibility of the previous president. He didn't act decisively, and I think Benue State was given a very they were dealt a poor hand of cards. And Benue is very passionate to my heart because I served there. I know the travails of the people. So when you say, if government does the right thing, there's going to be a reprisal attack. So what's government's duty if government cannot arrest those people behind the reprisal attacks? Why should anybody? I love Governor Wike a lot. I think that is the kind of person that we need as the minister of the FCT.
So you don't agree when some people say that there are banana peels around, so he should be very careful?
There are banana peels around for every politician. The greatest banana peel of any politician is we, the people, because we put them there, and they should be careful of that. They should be conscious of that. This is the only planned city that we have in Nigeria. We built the FCT from scratch. Why should some people be desecrating the master plan? Why should we have cows being on the lawn in front of the Eagle Square and other beautiful places? Why should we have cows? Shouldn't cows be kept? Even if we want to do natural grazing, we don't have enough forests outside of Abuja or fields outside of Abuja that we can keep the cows. It's the brazenness for me, and that was because the former occupants of the presidential palace seemed to have sympathy towards the herders, he himself being a herder. So they just went amok and thought they could do whatever they want or do whatever they like. Have you not seen that Miyetti Allah and Mark Bano, they've all kept quiet now because they know that their man is not in Aso Rock. The former president was a grand patron of Miyetti Allah. So, they just thought they could get away with anything. Yes, we know that it's climate change, it's drought keeps pushing the herders southwards, but we could do better. Not when you have cows being, it's pathetic, on the streets of Abuja. Not even in central area, even in Life Camp in Katampe, outside your studios here, do you not see sometimes is that not an eyesore? So we human beings, everybody has to slow down for the herders to move their cattle. Why are we still behaving as if we're in 1875 in the year 2023? In a nutshell, I support the Minister of the FCT. His antecedents as governor of River State shows he spent their money wisely, and that's what people want. There will always be elements of misapplication of funds in government, or what we call embezzlement or whatever. You cannot have 100% foolproof system in government, but at least let projects get to people. Right. Nobody is going to fault what Governor Wike did in River State, and that's why it's called Mr. Projects. I hope he brings that attitude to the Federal Capital Territory. Make sure that we have proper houses built in the properly designated places. Now, if you're building a project and it falls, then that land should be taken over by the government. You're putting everybody at a risk. If that project succeeds, in being commissioned, if it didn't fall at construction site, you can imagine where we are now. If it was badly constructed, everybody's life is at stake in this premises because a contractor did a poor job. Are we going to look at costs? Exactly? Are we going to keep looking away from doing the right thing? So I think President Tinubu got it right by bringing he's fearless, and
so in one word, if he threatens, or like some people say, he's threatening. Do you see that as threatening?
He's doing his job.
If he says he's going to do it, you see him do it.
He's doing his job. I like people who say something and do it. We have enough people in government. Government is known for false promises. I know Governor Wike does not give any false promise.
Kola Alakwini, international human rights lawyer. It's been a wonderful time having this conversation with you.
It's always a pleasure hanging out with you. Thank you.
All right, viewers, that's where we end this conversation with Kola Alakwini, international human rights lawyer. I'm sure you must have been rightly educated, entertained, and informed. I will see you next time. Keep watching The Conversation, because you never know who my next guest will be and what my next topic will be all about. But before I leave, I'd like to say thank you to all of my crew, my director, my producer, my editor. You all are the best. God bless you and yours, and God bless Nigeria.